Peter, some of the ideas that I most enjoy from bringing people together around ideas they care about is just the idea that it's fabulous to start change from thinking about people's strengths, from thinking about what are the real strengths, what are the real successes that a community has, and how do we think of change as building upon that rather than fixing what's been broken or fixing what's inadequate. To me, that's some of the most exciting ideas that are baked into this particular unit that we've been working on.
Well, I see actually two facets of that. As you were talking, I was remembering just a simple little working session, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, where we had a group of teachers and just started off asking one of the questions we almost always ask in any kind of workshop setting. So, why are you a teacher? That was it. You know, they were groups of 3 or 4, and what really touched me, they had a great conversation. At the end, one of the people said, you know, no one's asked me that question in so long. You know, it was really touching because you realize people work really hard and they get so disconnected from their own aspiration. So I think there's two facets of this. That's more like the pure aspirational question. You know, that's why it's such a good question. Why did I become and why am I? And then the other is, and what have we accomplished? I agree with you completely. You know, it's so easy to always get into that critical mode and look at what's not working. In some sense, we probably all have an obsessive gene that somehow wants us to kind of focus in on what's not working. And it takes a little bit of discipline to both touch the aspirational and the reflection on what's really working. And people think, well, we shouldn't do it. It's a waste of time. Why talk about what's already working? But it's really good. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more.
In my doctoral work, I went and interviewed 100 teachers who were working on incorporating technology in their classroom in new ways. And one of the things that struck me most about their motivation to continue this innovative work was, to what extent did their school leaders acknowledge that work? Were there people in the building who took the time to say, hey, that's really interesting. I'm not sure that's right, or wow, that's really knocking my socks off, but it's neat that you're working on that. And 2, what a block it was, what an anchor it was to be ignored. When teachers reached out and said, hey, we've been trying this kind of stuff, and the principal would say, oh, or wouldn't reply back or whatever it is, how much of a sort of psychological anchor that was. So I think the idea that we can start from celebrating where people are at, and obviously we want to do that in the context of saying, well, the reason why we're doing change is because we think we can always get better. But every community has lots of success to build on.
Yeah, just look at parenting 101. You're always telling a kid, that's really good. And it's not just to kind of puff them up, but because acknowledgement of where you're at is actually quite critical at learning, and we can often miss that a lot of what we really care about we've already got. We're already doing. So then you can move on. No, it's really absolutely right.
So one of the questions that I think a lot of folks in this course might have is, not everyone is going to get on board with what we're doing.
Yes.
There's always going to be teachers who see new initiatives, who've been baffled by one change initiative after another, by pendulum swinging back and forth, and they want to keep doing things the way they've been doing it for a long time and don't want to engage in conversations about innovation.
Right.
What are your thoughts about addressing those challenges?
So I've always deeply dislike this term resistance to change. And the reason is I don't find it very helpful. Very often people go around, well, so-and-so is just resisting change, or that group, whoever, fill in the blank, are always going to resist this change. It's usually more an ego statement and an expression of frustration than anything that's strategic. What we've always found is in any change initiative, the people who get involved early on, sometimes are the ones who are really important for the next 5 years, sometimes not. Sometimes people who don't get involved at all turn out to be crucial. And in any organization, there's a certain number of people who like excitement. It's new. Wow, count me in.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to build from that kind of energy. And then there's other people who aren't going to get involved no matter what. As I say, after they retire, they'll get involved.
Yeah, right.
Just let them go.
Yeah.
But in between is a large number of folks. And they will kind of stand back for a variety of reasons, and trying to appreciate those reasons over time is really important. So for example, you could have a kind of a veteran person who's been in the school a long time, has seen a lot of things come and go, and is just a little jaundiced. You can't blame them. They've seen so many fads, and they're kind of sitting there on the fence and going, well, sounds, but who cares? Really. But when they start to see outcomes, and they come around a year later and go, wow, I was really kind of skeptical of all your mumbo jumbo about systems or kid-centered or whatever it was.
Or when else that happens is when kids wander in their class and they go, hey, how come we're not doing what Mr. Senge is doing in his class? How come
or they see what the kid can do.
Yep.
And then they come out and they go, well, but you seem to be accomplishing something with these kids. Then they get really interested. And so we've often found if you go 5 years out and you look at the distribution of important leaders of an initiative, 2/3 or more will be in that. We always called them the patient pragmatists. They're not really emotionally against it. They just haven't seen evidence yet.
Yep.
And that's why obviously all the evidence-based stuff is important. But as you said, the real evidence that matters, they meet a kid and they go, wow, I had you in my class last year and I can't believe this is the same kid.
Yeah.
And that's what brings them out. And so that's again why I just, resistors to change, it's too categorical.
Yep.
It really doesn't help you strategically.
So the other thing I think that builds on that is that when we turn to thinking about how we get teachers sharing work with one another, a lot of times initiative leaders will say, oh, here are the people who are who are first out of the gates, who are furthest along. We want them to be sharing their work more than anything else. And I often think it can be really strategic to say, well, maybe have some of those folks share is great, but really the person who you want to be the exemplar of your initiative is someone who is skeptical at first,
yes,
who maybe even hasn't gotten as far along as the people who are first out of the gate, but the people in the community who you go, if that person is really getting behind this initiative, then we really ought to be thinking about what this can do for our kids.
So you're always looking at the people have kind of natural leadership influence. And they're not going to be necessarily the biggest, most boastful personalities. Quite the opposite often. Again, they're the people who are seen as competent and are not easy to get involved. I agree completely.
That's great.